Hello everybody and welcome to the last newsletter of this half term. Now you will have seen that Firefly is closing down on the 31st of May, and I would urge all of you who want to get hold of school reports that you may not have downloaded already to do so by that date. School reports are a wonderful thing to have later on in life to look through, both for the child but also for the parents. I've actually been rifling through the boxes I have from school to try and find my old school reports, and I can't find them at the moment. But if I do, I'm going to write down a few choice quotes and read them to you next time. I have found a lot of my school books. I think my parents were very assiduous in keeping all my books, and reading through them, I'm just amazed at how much physics, chemistry, biology, maths, and so forth I knew at one point. It makes you realize how much you learn at school, which sadly later on you don't use or you forget. It was comforting for me to see that my Latin was a reasonably good standard and that it was a good idea for me to continue with it. But I just wanted to read to you today a few quotations from famous people where the reports are very blunt and, as it turns out, completely wrong in terms of the prognosis as to what their lives are going to be in future. So who is this about? Is a constant trouble to everybody and is always in some scrape or other. He cannot be trusted to behave himself anywhere. That was Winston Churchill. He must devote less of his time to sport if he wants to be a success. You can't make a living out of football. That was Gary Lineker. It would seem that X thinks he is running the school and not me. If this attitude persists, one of us will have to leave. That's a good one for headmasters. That was about Richard Briers, the actor. Now this one. He will never amount to anything. Albert Einstein. A persistent muddler. Vocabulary negligible. Sentences mal-constructed. He reminds me of a camel. That's Roald Dahl. Off you go, and I'm glad to get rid of you. Don't see many school reports having those sorts of lines in them today. That was about the writer, Laurie Lee. So we're much more diplomatic and positive in reports now, and of course the aim is to try to encourage children to see the way forward, to praise what is good, and then where there are difficulties to suggest strategies for improvement. So I hope all of you will have managed to get the reports you need, but don't worry if you can't, because the school, of course, does hold all these reports, and you can always contact the office if you need to get them in the future. Well, it's been an extremely busy and exciting week in school, and last night Dr. Lawson contacted all the lower sixth formers who had put in their bids to become prefects and head boy, head girl next year. It's been a funny year for the current upper sixth, of course, not at all normal in terms of their prefect roles, and it's a great shame that the pandemic has meant that many of the things that our prefect team would normally do have not been able to happen. So I'm sure the lower sixth are very much looking forward to next year and a more normal year when they can do all the interesting and exciting things they were talking about in their videos that they produced for the leadership team to watch. And I must say I was very impressed indeed by the videos that all the students put together. In the end, some difficult decisions had to be made, but it's great to be able to announce that Alex Lambol will be next year's head boy and Emmy Plater will be next year's head girl. And of course there are lots of prefect roles and so forth. So we'll make sure we get a picture of the new prefects after half term and put an article in the newsletter giving a bit more information at that point. Now this week, of course, also saw the end of the assessments process, and as I noted in my letter earlier this week, we've been hugely impressed by the seriousness and the amount of work that students have put into this process, which has also, of course, been highly demanding for staff. And this isn't over yet. There's still a lot of work to be done, and the last act of the whole thing will be Dr. Raynott and myself meeting individually with all heads of departments to go through the grades before they're submitted to the exam boards. Now, this is a unique set of circumstances, it's put a huge stress and pressure on schools, and we have to hope that the whole thing will run very smoothly across the summer, and of course with the exam results being announced a bit earlier than they would normally be done. Details of the Learning Journeys program also, of course, going out. So that's going to be an interesting one for Year 11 and the Upper 6th to engage in. And in the lower school, we had our Principals Awards Assembly yesterday. This is always a very joyful assembly because we give out lots of awards for different things, maths and spelling and other contributions to the school. And we were delighted to welcome Madame Gallagher this time, talking about houses and the house competitions, and she's just set the lower school a couple of more competitions which they got very excited about. So a great deal going on with the houses there. On Wednesday in the senior school we had our Wellbeing Day, and I hope your children enjoyed that, and both the games in the afternoon but also the RSE, the Relationships and Sex Education, in the morning. This is a really important part of our PSHE program. And talking to the pupils as they came out, they all seem to have benefited from it, and we're glad to have had the chance to do that. Now, I hope that this half term, with the weather looking a little bit better, will be a good time for you and your families. And I very much hope that in and amongst some revision that I'm sure your children will be doing, they will also get a good chance to relax and switch off. Today, of course, a very different sort of day. So when you hear this, your children will have been at home. If you're in the senior school, working towards those exams, getting some revision under their belts, while the teachers at school would have been doing some really very important work on the teacher assessed grades, and also, of course, looking at the work that the children have produced. So an intense and busy time. So I really hope you do have a good half term, and I look forward to speaking to you again in June.